Scientists have finally solved the Loch Ness Monster mystery. Here's the spoiler, you ready? It's not a real monster. It's probably a dinosaur that survived through the ages, or just a bunch of debris floating on the water. Thanks to many findings on the Loch Ness creature, we have proof of another story to tell you. It was 1933 when a man named George Spicer and his wife were driving along the shores of Loch Ness. That's when they saw something massive with a long neck moving across the road. It looked like a creature straight out of the prehistoric era, a dinosaur-like beast unlike anything they'd ever seen. That was the moment that Loch Ness monster theories started spreading around like wildfire. One of the most famous Loch Ness monster sightings came just a year later, in 1934, when a man took a photograph that became the most well-known image of Nessie. That's the nickname she was given. She? Anyways, the photo, known as the surgeon's photograph, showed a long-necked creature rising out of the water, and for years it convinced people that the monster was real. But years later, the truth came out. One of the men who helped take the photo confessed it was all a hoax. The photo had been staged after all. When the photo was published, it had been significantly cropped. This made the animal in the picture look much bigger than in real life, fueling the theories that the Loch Ness monster did in fact exist. In the 1960s, one of the first big scientific attempts to investigate the mystery of the Loch Ness monster happened. A research team took sonar equipment to the lake and spent hours scanning the waters in search of evidence of large creatures. What they found was puzzling. They recorded several objects moving deep in the loch, or lake, with no clear explanation as to what it was. Though the team didn't manage to capture anything definitive, this sighting helped fuel the belief that there was indeed something massive living in Loch Ness. After that, research about the mystery of the Loch Ness monster kept popping up. In 1972, with the help of underwater photography, some researchers managed to capture strange images, which got people's hopes up for a minute. But the truth is, this early research about the Loch Ness monster was far from conclusive. Now, of course, not everyone bought into the mystical, magical theories about the Loch Ness monster. Theory 1, from a professor of zoology at Oxford University, has made it clear that the monster is a biological impossibility. Hey, my pediatrician said that about me, too. Meanwhile, he says that no skeletal remains have ever been found in the region. Plus, no fishermen have ever caught anything resembling the creature in their fishing nets. For him, this works as proof that it simply can't be real. When it comes to the famous photos of the Loch Ness monster as evidence, well, that's pretty simple. The professor offers a more down-to-earth explanation. He argues that these images are either showing floating debris or birds, like cormorants, which have long necks and often appear to be low in the water. When people refute his suggestion, he takes us back to human psychology and explains that people often make mistakes and misjudge the size of things, especially when they just caught a glimpse of it, and even more so when they are hoping to see something specific. Now, many of those alleged photos depict an animal with a long neck and a small head, which has led some to believe that what they're seeing is a plesiosaur, a giant marine reptile that lived 215 million years ago and disappeared with the dinosaurs. The idea of a plesiosaur surviving all these years is a theory that's been around since the first sightings of the creature. But this researcher isn't buying it. He explains that no plesiosaur fossils have been found in the region dating to anything later than 66 million years ago. The idea of a prehistoric creature still lurking in the waters of Loch Ness just doesn't hold up scientifically. Then there's theory number 2, from a British naturalist who has spent over 50 years investigating the Loch Ness monster phenomenon. His conclusion is a little less dramatic. He believes that most people who report sightings of long-necked creatures are misidentifying other animals. He suggests people think they are seeing a sea serpent. Reports of sightings from the Loch Ness monster have been around since the 6th century CE, long before they were distilling Scotch whiskey or other explanations. Early reports of these sea serpents describe large creatures with long snake-like bodies and multiple humps. Some say the creatures were as big as boats, and many swore they saw something swimming in the waters. Many of these early sea serpent sightings may have been misunderstandings or exaggerations of normal animals in the loch, like large fish or even swimming birds. They could have been large eels, which are known to live in Loch Ness. These eels, especially when they're moving, might have given the impression of a long, undulating creature in the water. People who saw these eels from a distance, particularly in low light or misty conditions, might have mistaken them for something much more mysterious. Theory number 3 says something else. Nessie is just a series of standing waves. These happen when two boat wakes move in opposite directions, creating a big hump in the water that could look like a creature from a distance. Loch Ness enthusiasts even showed how it works, with footage from Fort Augustus, where a river meets Loch Ness. These enthusiasts had big plans to use drones with infrared cameras and special underwater microphones to search the loch. Now, Loch Ness is massive, stretching around 23 miles long and more than 700 feet deep. So, they thought they needed drones and infrared cameras to put an end to this discussion. But despite everything, they haven't found Nessie. But it's not only the Loch Ness Monster that lacks scientific explanation. There have also been scores of sightings of Yetis and Sasquatches that no one can really explain. Folks have made movies, dreaming of finding the truth about these creatures. But, according to recent research and evidence, it looks unlikely that we'll ever find definitive evidence of their existence. Science says they can explain Sasquatch sightings, and this is how. Biologists who study wildlife using camera traps, which are set up in remote areas to capture images of passing animals, have long attempted to find elusive species. These cameras detect movement and snap pictures, providing invaluable data on the biodiversity of different ecosystems. As camera traps collect more photos over time, the number of species recorded grows. However, after a while, the number plateaus, suggesting that no new species are being detected. While it's impossible to claim 100% certainty, researchers say that after significant camera deployment, it's safe to say the likelihood of discovering new species, especially large ones like Bigfoot or the Yeti, drops significantly. Camera trap studies have been running for years in regions where these creatures are rumored to live, but so far, no conclusive evidence has surfaced. Instead, the supposed proof of Bigfoot or the Yeti often comes from blurry photos or shaky videos taken by individuals who claim to have encountered them. The scientific understanding of biology also makes the existence of Bigfoot highly unlikely. Often described as a great ape, Bigfoot would have had to evolve in North America. However, great apes evolved in Africa, and the only great ape to make it to the Americas is Homo sapiens, whose ancestors crossed the Bering Strait only about 16,000 years ago. This is far too short a time for a new species like Bigfoot to have evolved. While it may be disappointing for these mysterious creature enthusiasts, the scientific evidence points firmly toward the conclusion that creatures like Bigfoot and the Yeti are more fantasy than reality. After decades of extensive scientific research, it's safe to say that yes, science has solved the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster, and it's pure fiction. So, what do you think? Hey, you've heard of Stonehenge? Of course you have. Big rocks mysteriously mounted in circles on a plain in England by, somebody. But what if England's Stonehenge is only a replica of another monument, and its builders just crossed the Atlantic and copied what someone had already done elsewhere? Well, it turns out researchers found another Stonehenge underneath the waters of Lake Michigan. This lake is a hotspot for woo-woo unexplained things. A bunch of disappearances, plane crashes, and now this, an ancient underwater monument that looks strangely enough like Stonehenge. We couldn't help ourselves and needed to dive deep into this story. A ring of massive stones, arranged in a way that felt all too familiar. They saw two circles, an outer one and an inner one, sitting 40 feet below the surface. But this wasn't just a random pile of rocks. These stones had been placed there, purposefully, by human hands. And by doing some further research, they discovered that they were staring at a structure that's over 9,000 years old. Think about it. This Stonehenge beneath Lake Michigan predates the pyramids. It predates Stonehenge itself by about 4,000 years. All of this information was enough to startle scientists at Northwestern Michigan University. But that was before they found this out. One of the stones had a carving, a faint but clear petroglyph of a mastodon. Mastodons kind of look like the ancestors to our modern-day elephants, but they have been extinct on planet Earth since 10,000 years ago. So, whoever built this underwater Stonehenge needed to be alive at the same time these creatures roamed our planet. This discovery raised many questions among scientists. I mean, why on earth would they go through all this trouble to lay rocks at the bottom of a lake? Well, first things first. Scientists believe that Lake Michigan had much less water back then than it does now. Second, it could have something to do with ancestral practices of First Nation people. There's one theory from a professor of the University of Michigan. He suggested that the stones formed a kind of prehistoric hunting trap. He believes that early hunters used the circular formation as a drive lane to herd large animals like the mastodons from the rock carvings we were just talking about. Once they got these huge animals into a tighter circle, they could be more easily hunted. But not everyone's convinced by this theory. Some believe the circle probably had a deeper spiritual purpose. According to local Native American tribes, like the Anishinaabe, stones are more than just rocks. They're living beings. They hold spiritual energy and represent a connection to the earth and all living creatures. An elder from the Anishinaabe community even suggested that these stones are sacred, placed there by their ancestors to honor the land and its creatures. Scientists are trying to study the stone formation in depth, like about 40 feet. But that's the problem, actually. The fact that it's underwater makes it super difficult, since they don't have the best technology. Traditional archaeological tools don't work as well when everything is submerged, but promising new technologies like stereophotogrammetry, which literally means making 3D models of a site, are helping scientists study the stone circle more closely. Still, research is slow and expensive, so it's hard to know when this mystery will come to a close. As we said, Lake Michigan is a hot spot for unexplained phenomena. Its lakebed is filled with shipwrecks, such as the Thomas Hume, a sturdy American schooner. It also collects debris from airplanes that have suddenly gone missing while flying the area, such as Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 that disappeared in the 1950s. Some people even call the area the Lake Michigan Triangle, suggesting paranormal activities like what happens in the Bermuda Triangle might be going on. The lake spans over 22,000 square miles, which means it's almost two-thirds the size of the country of Ireland. In 2024, scientists were able to access another one of Lake Michigan's mysteries, the wreck of the Margaret A. Muir schooner. This 130-foot-long sailing ship sank over 130 years ago. The discovery was announced just recently by the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeological Association, the WUAA, whose team found the shipwreck sitting 50 feet below the surface just off the shores of Algoma, Wisconsin. Built in 1872, the Margaret A. Muir was a three-masted schooner built to carry heavy cargo across the Great Lakes. Her final voyage started out as a routine trip. Loaded with bulk salt, the ship left Bay City, Michigan, heading for South Chicago, Illinois. But on September 30th, 1893, things took a bad turn. Just as the Muir approached the town of Annapolis, now known as Algoma, a sudden storm hit. The ship began taking on water fast. The captain of the boat ordered his crew to abandon ship, and thankfully, they all made it to shore safely. For more than a century, the wreck sat undisturbed on the lakebed, its location a mystery. But thanks to a combination of historical research and high-resolution sonar, WUAA searchers finally found her in May of last year. The wreck is remarkably well preserved, with parts of the deck and gear still visible. Well, just a few lakes over to the left, researchers uncovered another impressive thing. At the bottom of Lake Mendota, near Madison, Wisconsin, researchers found 11 ancient canoes. They believe the oldest of the canoes dates all the way back to 2500 BCE. Now, if you don't get why that's important, it's because you're thinking with today's head. If in a classic Midwest highway you see a bunch of pickups, then back in the ancient days you see only canoes. They were the main mode of transportation for indigenous cultures. They were used to fish in deep waters, trade goods, and travel long distances. The reason why scientists were so excited with this discovery is because they had never found any proof of what canoes were being used for in this region back then. And to understand the local cultures that inhabited the area during this time period, they needed to have some information on that. This exciting discovery was announced by the Wisconsin Historical Society in May 2024. The first canoe, which they believe is around 1,200 years old, was pulled from the lake in 2021. Then a second one was dug up in 2022. And now divers have found at least 11 more canoes along what would have been an ancient shoreline, long since submerged. One theory is that these canoes were intentionally sunk to keep them from freezing or warping in winter. It's possible people stored them in the same spot for generations. Or maybe this is just a small part of a much bigger settlement. Historians do believe there could be an ancient village hidden under the water of the lake. Divers have already found stone tools, like net sinkers used for fishing, but the village itself hasn't been located yet. Truth is, while the Great Lakes often steal all the thunder, scientists point out that smaller lakes like Mendota have stories too. The Wisconsin Historical Society is working closely with Native nations to piece together more about the lake's history. You'll need to believe me when I say there is a third Stonehenge, all the way under the waters of Lake Constance, Switzerland. I mean, think of it like Stonehenge's cousin. Archaeologists began to discover this back in 2015, when they found a line of 170 man-made stone cairns under the lake. Scientists say this was most likely the work of several villages, and that the cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose because, well, the formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide, and they can build up to 6 feet. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. So around the time the original Stonehenge was being built. Some of the facts that link them together are their construction dates, as well as the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circular format. Scientists don't know much about this site yet, but hey, I see a pattern manifested all over the world, don't you?
Lake Michigan is one of the largest and most mysterious freshwater lakes in the United States. And now, deep inside it, scientists have stumbled upon something unexplainable. Vast, round craters scattered all across the lake's floor. It all started in 2022. A team of researchers wanted to map the lake's bottom and look for some shipwrecks. At first, they were sure it's going to be just some typical rocky terrain or sandy patches. But what they saw on their sonar screens stopped them cold. Strange circular shapes that looked almost too perfect to be natural. They were hiding about 500 feet beneath the surface, in places where the water turns dark and impenetrable. Those guys are huge, ranging from 300 to 600 feet wide. They also plunge nearly 40 feet deep. And there are dozens of them, neatly arranged like some footprints. But the team had no idea what these things were. Then, in August 2024, the mystery only deepened. Using a remotely operated vehicle, they got a closer look at these formations. There were about 40 of them. No one had ever seen anything quite like this before in the Great Lakes. What could have created those craters? Could they be ancient? Perhaps remnants of some geological event lost to time? If that's the case, it's weird how long these holes have likely been sitting there, undisturbed. Theories started popping up. One possibility was that they could be sinkholes, or dolines. Those are basically holes that suddenly appear in the ground when the surface layer collapses. The rock beneath the surface, often made of limestone, gets slowly dissolved by water over time, creating voids underground. When the surface of those voids can no longer hold its own weight, it caves in, and this forms a hole. Think of it like when you poke a straw through the lid of a drink. Sinkholes can be small dips or huge, spanning up to 2,000 feet. They can happen gradually or all at once. Sometimes they can swallow entire cars or even buildings. And Lake Michigan sits on limestone bedrock. It erodes pretty easily when water flows through it. Sinkholes like these have already been found in Lake Huron, and they look kinda similar. But there are some plot holes, no pun intended, with this theory. For example, it's wild how they all would be so huge. It's also weird and pretty rare for sinkholes to occur in a lake bed. They also kinda resemble a straight pattern. They seem to extend generally southward, forming a loose line, which is pretty weird. If these are sinkholes, then they're definitely not playing the usual geological rules. Though it might be some new, unusual process at play beneath the lake's surface that we haven't discovered yet. There's another theory though: glaciers. Glaciers are wild rivers of ice. They covered much of the Earth during the last ice age, and they're incredibly powerful. While they might move slowly, sometimes only a few inches per day, they have such immense weight that they can reshape entire landscapes over thousands of years. Glaciers can grind and scoop the land beneath them. They're basically like colossal bulldozers. Their weight, combined with the slow but steady movement, grounds down everything beneath them: rocks, soil, even bedrock. This can create deep gouges in the Earth's surface, called glacial troughs. During the last ice age, there were lots of glaciers all over the northern US, including the Great Lakes region. If they moved across what is now Lake Michigan, they could have carved out these deep holes. Glaciers often move in a pretty straight path. As they move, they cause terrain to erode, but the resulting erosion varies based on terrain. Sometimes there are places where the bedrock is softer or fractured, and these places are more easily carved and crushed by the glacier. That could explain why some holes could be bigger and deeper than others. Harder bedrock is less affected. But usually this leads to rounded, crescent-shaped depressions known as chatter marks. Those marks are more like grooves rather than circular, big craters like those in Lake Michigan. Once the glaciers melted, the Great Lakes themselves formed. If the craters were formed by them, they may have filled with water, becoming part of the Michigan Lake. Though this theory is more like a speculation, so we need more evidence. But there's another layer to this mystery. The craters are not just curious geological formations. They actually may hold valuable clues about early life on Earth. Parts of Lake Michigan, especially dark ones, are relatively low in oxygen. It's like a lighter version of deep ocean environments that often have very little of this element. For example, hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, underwater openings in the Earth's crust with some hot, mineral-rich water that are often very low in oxygen. But some organisms love places like these. For example, opossum shrimp. Teeny tiny shrimp-like creatures that love cold, deep waters. They get their name because they have a pouch to carry their young until they're ready to be on their own, like an opossum. Or deep-water sculpin fish, small bottom-dwelling fish that also enjoys cold lakes. They're well adapted to living in dark waters and usually stay close to the lake bed. And weird organisms like invasive quagga mussels, which kinda look like shells. These are small freshwater mussels that have spread there to the Great Lakes. They attach themselves to hard surfaces and can cause problems for ecosystems by competing with native species for food and space. All these guys could be in Lake Michigan, and even more. There might be microbes or even bacteria that are specially adapted to these harsh conditions, just like it was in Lake Huron. There's only a handful of creatures that could survive deep within these craters, and studying them could give us insight into how life once flourished in Earth's ancient, oxygen-poor oceans. That's because it's in places similar to these where some of the earliest life forms thrived. Early Earth had an atmosphere with little oxygen, although it was much more hot, and ancient microbes adapted to this. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, have always had a bit of a ghostly reputation. Like, even this mission was organized to study the shipwrecks. There were about 6,000 of them in the Great Lakes. Many of these wrecks are still sitting on the lake beds, preserved by the cold, fresh waters. And shipwrecks aren't the only strange things tied to the Great Lakes. Over the years, there have been stories of unexplained disappearances. Boats and even planes have vanished without a trace. The lakes, often calm on the surface, can suddenly turn dangerous with unpredictable storms and massive waves, leading to these mysterious events. Not even mentioning all the creepy stuff people noticed there over the centuries, such as ghostly lights above water or bizarre weather patterns like eerie, sudden fogs that seem to appear out of nowhere. In 2007, they even discovered some prehistoric structure that looks like Stonehenge there. Well, it was way smaller, but still. It lay about 40 feet below the surface in the heart of Grand Traverse Bay, and it's speculated to be about 9,000 years old, way older than Stonehenge. Looks like this is a print of those who lived in the area thousands of years ago. These massive stones are arranged in a careful, winding pattern stretching over a mile. They range in size from basketballs to compact cars. But one, in particular, stands out. A boulder 3.5 to 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It's etched with the image of a mastodon, a creature that roamed the earth about 11,000 years ago before it went extinct. It probably sank there during the end of the last ice age we mentioned. This period had reshaped the region. This place is underwater now, but back in the day, it was still dry land. So the stones were probably created by people who lived there, though we're not sure why. Were they used as hunting blinds? Or was it some sort of an ancient calendar? Who knows? Only about 15% of the Great Lakes floors have been explored. Now, scientists are gearing up for a deeper dive into this mystery, both literally and figuratively. They want to analyze the lake beds surrounding the craters, hoping that maybe something in the environment around them might have caused them to appear. They have initiatives like Lakebed 2030. These missions should map the entire underwater landscape. This would help us learn tons of interesting stuff about Lake Michigan and our planet's past. Who knows what other secrets these dark waters hide? The latest super eruption of Yellowstone occurred 640,000 years ago, and it was long before Homo sapiens saw the light of day. But we were around during another, no less devastating natural disaster. This super eruption took place on the island of Sumatra around 74,000 years ago. That's when an erupting supervolcano wreaked havoc on huge territories, sending up plumes of debris and ash that spread for thousands of miles and caused temperatures on the planet to plummet. The effects of this super eruption were visible as far away as southern Africa. Experts believe they could have impacted early humans there. By the time the volcano erupted, our ancestors had already been using stone tools and had likely known how to produce yarn. And some specialists even think that the Toba super eruption was so powerful it could push our ancestors to the brink of extinction. They claim that Toba might be the largest volcanic eruption to occur on Earth within the last 2 million years. The eruption disgorged so much pyroclastic rock it would be enough to cover the entire United States to the depth of a one-story house. About a third of that deposit piled up on northern Sumatra, while a lot more ended up beneath the floor of the Indian Ocean. The super eruption left an elliptical crater lake around 60 miles long. The caldera is so large it's hard to feel that you're indeed in a volcano. Pumice deposits from the eruption remain in the canyon walls and go deep below the ground. There aren't many arguments about the amount of pumice and ash involved in this disaster. At the same time, experts aren't sure how much sulfur ended up in the atmosphere. Even some sulfur layers in the polar ice could be potential candidates, but so far, scientists haven't found any connection between them and Toba. But let's get back to the dramatic impact the super eruption had on early humans. It turns out some not only survived but even thrived after this natural catastrophe, at least judging by the artifacts they made during and after the eruption. The disaster might not have posed a serious threat to those of our ancestors who took refuge along the coast. Genetic evidence hints that modern humans descend from a few thousand people that ventured out of Africa around 60,000 years ago. Why just a few thousand? According to some experts, the rest of our ancestors could have been devastated by the Toba eruption. After all, the supervolcano spewed out 1,000 cubic miles of dust and rock in a flash, leaving a scar in the ground that was dozens of miles wide. All that dust and sulfur Toba sent into the atmosphere potentially cooled the surface of our planet, which led to the appearance of glaciers and the lowering of Earth's sea levels. And since Toba might have had an important role in shaping humankind, scientists have been working hard trying to understand precisely how early humans reacted to this disaster. In 2011, several researchers found an enigmatic soil sample in South Africa's Pinnacle Point, an archaeological site overlooking the Indian Ocean. This sample contained some volcanic ash. After examining the layer, they found more than 400,000 artifacts left by early humans. Those ranged from heat-treated stone tools to signs of fire and animal bones. Based on this finding, the team suggested that early humans on the South African coast thrived after the eruption, living in that area for thousands of years and improving their tools. The region might have served as a refuge during and after the Toba eruption. A 2009 study suggested that the eruption could have lowered global temperatures by 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It would have made survival tough elsewhere in Africa. If there had been a volcanic winter, it wouldn't have been as cold along the coastline. On the other hand, newer studies claim that Toba spewed out so much sulfur into the atmosphere that the resulting aerosols could have stuck together, which would have limited their cooling effect in the long term. In other words, right after the eruption, temperatures would have plummeted, but only in some regions. And after 3 years or so, the effects of the eruptions would have calmed down altogether, becoming not dangerous to humans. Well, apparently, more research is needed. Meanwhile, let's figure out if we should watch out for any volcanoes these days. Last year, thousands of small earthquakes shook the ground near Iceland's Svartsengi geothermal power plant. Magma rose to the surface there, and now it has opened wide fractures slicing through the small town of Grindavik. The ground there is still swelling, and an eruption might happen with little notice. But of course, that's not all. Over the planet, 45 other volcanoes keep rumbling. For example, Italy's Vesuvius, that infamous thing that finished the city of Pompeii in 79 CE. Over the last 17,000 years, the volcano has experienced 8 explosive eruptions, followed by powerful pyroclastic flows, dense masses of super hot ash, lava fragments, and gases flowing at high speeds. The volcano's last eruption happened in 1944. Mount Rainier is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the USA. Its high elevation, chemical composition, and proximity to Washington's Seattle and Tacoma suburbs, and the volcano's ability to produce massive pyroclastic flows make Mount Rainier a threat to consider. The heat from this volcano could potentially melt the ice and snow covering it, leading to rapid downstream flows of debris, mud, and rocks. The Novarupta volcano in Alaska's Katmai National Park and Reserve formed in a 1912 eruption, which was the world's largest in the 20th century. The volcano sent almost 7 cubic miles of ash and debris into the air. It also produced such a powerful ash flow that it created the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. Mount Pinatubo is located in a populated region in the Philippines. It became notorious after a 1991 massive eruption, which was the second largest eruption of the 20th century. More than 700 people lost their lives during that natural disaster. Today, more than 21 million people live within 62 miles of Pinatubo. Mount Agun, a continuously erupting volcano in Indonesia, had its last major eruption in 1963. It was one of the most tragic eruptions in the country's history. It lasted for 11 months, producing ashfall and pyroclastic flows that led to the loss of more than 1,000 lives and serious property damage. People saw ash plumes above the volcano throughout 2018, following the eruption in November 2017. Japan's Mount Fuji hasn't erupted since 1707. That year, a massive earthquake likely set it off. In 2014, experts warned that Fuji could be at risk of another eruption following the 9-magnitude earthquake that shook Japan in 2011. Experts believed the earthquake had raised pressure below Fuji. The eruption in 1707 sent so much ash and debris into the air that all this mass even reached Tokyo. Should Fuji erupt again, it would affect more than 25 million people in the surrounding areas. The eruption of Washington's Mount St. Helens in 1980 was one of the most destructive volcanic events in U.S. history. 57 people, as well as thousands of animals, lost their lives during that natural disaster. The eruption also destroyed around 200 square miles of forest. Experts think that Mount St. Helens' history of massive eruptions means that future catastrophes are bound to happen. The next explosive eruption might send large amounts of ash all over the Pacific Northwest. No wonder the volcano is under close monitoring. One of Indonesia's most active volcanoes, Mount Merapi, has been erupting for centuries. NASA claims that the biggest risk of this volcano is pyroclastic flows, which can spread over vast areas and harm loads of people. For the last time, Merapi erupted in January 2024, sending plumes of smoke into the air. These days, more than 24 million people live in the area surrounding this volcano. There's a lake in the heart of Asia that holds 1/5 of all the world's liquid freshwater. It's more than all the 5 Great Lakes have together. Even if all the rivers on our planet suddenly change their direction and set on a mission to drain this lake, it would take them a whole year to finish the job. I'm talking about the deepest lake in the world, Lake Baikal. If you decide to go all the way down to its deepest point, prepare for a journey of almost 5,400 feet. The descent takes several hours, but the rift floor of the lake is way deeper, between 5 to 7 miles beneath the surface. It means it could be even further down than the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest known place on Earth. The amount of water it has would be enough for everyone on Earth to have something to drink for up to 50 years. This mighty giant of a lake replenishes its water completely every 383 years. Baikal has a great delivery crew of over 300 rivers and streams, bringing their waters right in. And only one river flows out of Baikal, the Angara, which is headed straight for the Arctic Ocean. Baikal isn't only the deepest, but also the oldest existing freshwater lake in the world. It formed at least 25 million years ago. It all began when the Earth's crust decided to play Tetris and created the lake and the surrounding mountains. At some point, Baikal must have been just a humble riverbed, but then tremors and fractures shook the Earth, and the distance between the shores got bigger. Water levels rose thanks to the melting glaciers. Then, several lakes formed and later merged into one. Baikal is one of around 20 lakes in the world that are older than 1 million years. And since it wasn't disturbed by glacial periods, it's a perfect research ground for scientists. Its deep-drilled core sediments can tell a lot about the climate of our planet in different periods. Since Baikal is in a rift basin with 2,000 seismic tremors per year, the lake is deepening and still growing in size. Its shores drift apart at around the same rate as South America and Africa are moving away from each other, so it has all the potential to become an ocean. Another thing Baikal has in common with the oceans is that it has water rich in oxygen, even at its lowest depths. This is one of the reasons why the fauna of the lake is so incredibly rich. It's home to over 2,500 various animals and 1,000 plant varieties. Around half of them are unique and only exist in this area, like the endemic algae, the Baikal omul fish, and the Baikal oilfish. There are also some bears, elk, and lynx living on its shores. They must appreciate the fact that the temperatures around the lake are always higher than the rest of Siberia, thanks to its huge water mass. Most Baikal dwellers prefer to stick to the bottom of the lake, but there's one brave guy you'll meet if you decide to visit. Meet the Baikal seal, also known as Nerpa. It's the only true freshwater seal in the world. Nerpa's eyes are so cute it nearly landed the part of Puss in Boots in Shrek. Nerpa in Boots sounds good to me. These huge eyes are there to help them follow their favorite pelagic fish underwater. There are other seal kinds that can handle freshwater or use it to breathe, but these cuties spend their entire lives in it. But wait, how did seals, which are supposed to be oceanic creatures, end up in a lake miles and miles away from the sea? About 400,000 years ago, during the Pleistocene era, these adventurous creatures traveled up the river and drainage systems that connected Lake Baikal to the Arctic Ocean. The ringed seal that still lives in the Arctic is believed to be the Baikal seal's closest ancestor. Today, Baikal seals are confined to their freshwater home because of the changes in waterways. And they seem to be pretty happy with their home as they can choose from a huge variety of food to eat. The seals mostly hang out in the north and central areas of the lake, but move south in the winter. The lake gets covered with ice, which they use as a chill-out zone, just like their oceanic cousins use rocks or the beach. Since at least 1969, Lake Baikal has had some mysterious ice rings pop up randomly here and there. At some point, they got so big that the astronauts even spotted them from space. The rings usually appear in late April, but can be there in January or May. Scientists couldn't crack the code on how these rings form for a while. They had all sorts of theories, and the most popular involved methane gas bubbles from the lake's depths. But then, scientists noticed that some of the rings were in shallower waters, where gas emissions don't happen. So, an international team of scientists decided to solve the mystery. They traveled to Lake Baikal, drilled holes in the ice, and dropped sensors into the water. In 2016, when they started the research, they heard that 2 vans had gotten stuck in the mysterious ice rings. Once they had analyzed the data from the sensors, it turned out that the secret behind the rings was warm eddies flowing clockwise under its ice cover. The currents were less intense in the center of the eddies, so the ice above them was thicker at the edges. The waters of the lake are so clear that you can see some extremely deep parts up to over 130 feet down. This is thanks to the surrounding mountains that send off melting ice right in. Plankton that live in the lake also helps clean the floating debris. When this crystal clear water freezes, it forms an unusually thick and see-through layer of ice. The wind likes to play sculptor on Baikal and creates one-of-a-kind pieces of art here. It picks up water, which, of course, freezes into the most unusual designs. Frozen bubbles and icicles you've never seen before. The location and geography of the lakes and the cycles of melting and refreezing create the perfect conditions for this ice workshop. And you can even see rocks that seem to be floating. The bottom of the rock freezes to the surface of the ice. Then, the strong winds wear away the surroundings, leaving a perfect pedestal for the rock. If you think the floating rocks look eerie, how about Baikal's version of the Loch Ness monster? The local Buryat people have a legend about the water dragon master that lives in the lake. A dragon is believed to be the most powerful creature living on Earth in Asian mythology. They believe there are 4 dragons living in the 4 seas, each responsible for one of the cardinal directions. Baikal is the North Sea in this story. The image of this dragon is supposedly etched in ancient petroglyphs on the cliffs of Baikal. There's also a hefty stone slab that looks like a monument dated back to somewhere between the 3rd and the 9th century BCE, depicting a mysterious water monster. Imagine the stories this stone could tell, echoing the whispers of a bygone era and leaving us to unravel the enigma of the Baikal cliffs. The legend says that a local warrior was chasing the dragon. He finally reached the largest Baikal island of Alkan. He was ready to face and defeat the dragon, but the beast turned into a beautiful girl, and they got married. That's one unusual twist to a classic defeat the dragon and take the girl story. So, local legends describe that dragon as a giant sturgeon with an almost gator-like snout and armored body. In reality, the mythical monster must be one of the many huge fish living in the lake. They can afford to grow to several feet in length thanks to the high levels of oxygen in the water. Beluga sturgeon can weigh several thousands of pounds, lives up to 50 or 60 years, and never stops growing.
The tranquil-looking Lake Manaun in Cameroon is one real trickster. At first, it may seem calm and peaceful, but this lake is like a fiery volcano waiting to erupt at any moment. And it doesn't even have the decency to give any warning signs. Its last outburst was way back in 1984, which caused a bang that left everyone in awe. It's like the lake's got a soda can mechanism down there, or in technical terms, it experiences a limnic eruption. This rare phenomenon happens when gas from deep under the water suddenly erupts. Certain things have to happen prior for it to occur though. There are some things you can look out for if you feel worried. For starters, if the vegetation around a lake looks a bit flattened, it might have previously experienced a limnic eruption. That's because the water can pop up with a lot of pressure and overflow. The water being a bit warmer all of a sudden can also mean you need to head to safety. There's this lake in Kazakhstan that looks like a total disaster on the surface, with empty tree trunks sticking out of the water. Not cute. But if you're feeling daring and want to take a swim, you'll be transported to a whole new world. Its story goes back to the year 1911, when there was a landslide that filled the valley with rainwater, completely submerging a local forest. As mesmerizing as it might sound, it's no easy task to dive in. The water is freezing, and all the algae, plants, and submerged trees make it a risky obstacle course. Have you heard about this scorching lake on the sunny Caribbean island of Dominica? The water around the edges is at a sweltering 180 to 197 degrees Fahrenheit. No wonder no one has the guts to measure the middle. It's that hot. Sure, the heat may go down once in a while, but who knows when those waters will start boiling again? Plus, this place is full of nasty gases like carbon dioxide. Because of them, let's just say it doesn't exactly smell like roses, more like rotten eggs. So unless you want to end up looking like a boiled lobster, I suggest you stay away from these waters. If you're planning a trip to Tanzania, you might want to think twice before diving into Natron Lake. Sure, it's got a beautiful reddish hue, but that's thanks to some bacteria that call this lake home. And don't even get me started on the pH levels. They're so high they might even strip the color off your swimsuit. But hey, at least the flamingos like it there. Those acid-loving birds are living their best lives in a group with 2.5 million of their closest feathered friends. How come these birds manage to thrive there, you might wonder? Well, no predators means no stress, which equals easy breeding. They also love feasting on that fancy bacteria, which makes the water all pink. You may think that Belize's Great Blue Hole is just calling out to you with its stunning blue hues and close proximity to land. But hold your flippers, because there's a catch. Sure, it's about 900 feet across and 300 feet deep, but lurking beneath the surface is a confusing patterns of tunnels filled with coral and wildlife. It's like finding your way through a maze at a theme park, but with more fish. And as if that wasn't tricky enough, the deeper you go, the fewer creatures you'll encounter. Why, you ask? Well, it turns out that there's a sneaky layer of hydrogen sulfide that covers the entire width of the hole, depriving any living creature of oxygen. Plan on heading to the Devil's Kettle waterfall in Minnesota? This one won't necessarily be dangerous for you, but you might end up losing some of your stuff out there if you don't pay attention. That's because this waterfall experiences a phenomenon that's a real head-scratcher for geologists. One part of the waterfall flows normally, while the other part disappears into a big ol' hole. And get this, not even ping pong balls can make it out. Scientists decided to investigate, and they went all out, even using GPS trackers. Initially, they couldn't figure it out until they realized that the hole acts like a giant blender. That water is getting spun around so hard, it's basically obliterating everything in its path. They finally measured the water volume and saw that it was still there, so it was supposed to come back out somewhere. The most likely explanation is that the water is probably re-emerging in the stream located beneath the waterfall. You've surely heard of the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, that's old news. But let me tell you about the Pacific's very own watery trap called the Devil's Sea. It's like a game of hide and seek, but with ships. They disappear and we can never find them again. The Kayo Maru No. 5 was on a mission to investigate a volcanic island, but the trip ended up being just one way. Add a dash of detective work to the subject and you'll find out the whole story about the Devil's Sea is more myth and less fact, but it doesn't make it any less interesting. If you're still interested in some mysterious ship disappearance, then Lake Superior is the place you'll want to read about. Even the most skilled scuba divers can't find a single piece of all those lost vessels. The main character of this lake story was a ship called the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, the biggest one to sink in the Great Lakes. To this day, people aren't sure why it sank. So, you're planning a little swim in one of the Great Lakes, huh? Well, might want to steer clear of Lake Michigan, unless you're really into extreme water sports. This bad boy has a reputation for being the most dangerous of the bunch, thanks to some sneaky undercurrents that like to snatch unsuspecting swimmers. Make sure to watch out for those pesky piers and docks that only add to the lake's swimming difficulty. If you're feeling adventurous, you might want to skip the months of October or November. This is when the temperatures start to drop and the currents get extra wild. Tibet has its dangerous lake too, and at first glance, it's gorgeous. But don't get too excited. It's got a salt content so high that nothing can survive in it. Some villagers around there actually consider it to be tainted with some sort of substance. The cherry on top? Other locals believe there's a selfish creature living in the lake who's hogging up all the space for itself. No wonder its nickname is Darkness. No list of dangerous waters is complete without Lake Victoria, the big kahuna of African lakes and the third biggest in the whole wide world. But beware, not all its waters are safe for us humans. Some regions can be real troublemakers because this lake has its own personal climate. And what does that mean? Mostly that you can't trust the weather here one bit. You could be soaking up some sweet rays one second, and the next you're running from a torrential downpour. Unless you want to be caught swimming in a storm, steer clear of this moody lake. You might have already seen pictures of Lake Hillier. It's like a giant pool of grapefruit juice in Australia. Scientists have been scratching their heads over it for centuries because they still can't figure out with certainty why it's pink. But here's the kicker, it's not the only one. Yep, there's another pink lake out there called Lake Retba. Both of these lakes have super high salt content, which is apparently a magnet for some fancy microorganisms. These little guys produce beta-carotene, you know, the substance that's in carrots. And that's what gives these lakes their groovy colors. Interested in swimming in this lake? It's not technically dangerous because the water has such high amounts of salt in it. There are no scary sea creatures to worry about. But, on the other hand, you'll need to make sure you don't accidentally take a sip. Drinking highly salted water will make you dehydrate faster than a plant in the desert.
On the outside, the surface of this lake looks like the aftermath of a disaster. Empty tree trunks spike out of the turquoise waters. The lake is surrounded by mountains, making it a quiet but unsettling place. But those who dare to swim under these dangerous waters will soon discover a whole new world. This isn't the beginning of a fairy tale. It's the actual story of Kayindi Lake, located in Sati, Kazakhstan. Back in 1911, an earthquake caused a major landslide in this location. The valley created eventually filled up with rainwater, practically submerging the forest. The trees that are located above the waters might look very sad, but beneath the surface, they remind you of an underwater forest. Since the waters are crystal clear most of the time, you can still see this fascinating view even from its shores. The ice-cold water makes this lake so tricky and, at times, even dangerous. And don't forget about all the algae, plants, and submerged trees that can rapidly become risky obstacles. Hey, I enjoy a steamy hot bath, but this boiling lake I'll tell you about now is really the stuff of scary dreams. It's located on the Caribbean island of Dominica, and its waters have temperatures between 180 and 197 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's just around the edges, since no one has ever dared to reach the middle of the lake to measure its core temperature. It's true that the heat can go down from time to time, but you never know when these waters may start to boil again. The place is also dangerous because of the gases it releases, such as carbon dioxide. It doesn't smell nice, trust me, but that's mostly because of the sulfur stuck in the steamy air. This seemingly calm lake also carries a dangerous surprise. Lake Manan, located in West Province, Cameroon. It's one of the few erupting lakes on the whole planet, similar to a volcano, and most of the time it does so without any warnings. Its last eruption dates back to 1894, when it caused serious damage. The chemical mechanism of such lakes works like a can of soda that you shake before opening. There are risky gases on the bottom of the waters, so any disturbance on the surface may trigger their eruption. Natron Lake in Tanzania may be beautiful to watch because of its unique reddish coloring, but it's definitely not a place you'd want to take a swim in. While the water is extremely salty, it also combines with algae, which, by the way, are responsible for the coloring. And that's not even the riskiest thing about it. Natron Lake has pH levels so high that they become corrosive. If you dampen a piece of dyed material in this lake, it'll soon be stripped of its color. These high levels of acidity can also cause serious problems to the human skin. It's not all bad for some creatures, as Lake Natron is the only home to over 2.5 million small flamingos. These acidic and brackish waters support their survival, so it's no wonder they like to stick around. Lake Nicaragua's danger factor has less to do with chemistry and more to do with its inhabitants. It's located on the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua and is the largest freshwater lake in Central America. When you first look at it, you won't think it can be dangerous, but because of the bull sharks inhabiting it, I wouldn't recommend taking a swim. Sharks tend to be unpredictable and at times intimidating creatures. Plus, they will eat everything if needed. Scientists initially believed this species of shark was only found in this lake, but they soon discovered that people had seen the same sharks in the Caribbean Sea. These astonishing creatures not only cross a distance of over 120 miles to get here, but can also adapt to freshwater, something not all fish can do. Belize's Great Blue Hole may seem alluring to divers. I mean, it has a gorgeous deep blue color and is pretty close to the mainland, about 62 miles. The problem is that beneath the surface of these tranquil waters is a mixed-up series of tunnels which contain many types of coral and other wildlife. These caves are what makes diving through the Great Blue Hole tricky. More so, specialists discover that deeper into the waters there are fewer and fewer creatures. Why? Because of a hidden layer of hydrogen sulfide that spans over the whole width of the sinkhole. Since there's no oxygen, no creature can ever survive this deep into the hole. Lake Lanier is the largest lake in the state of Georgia. It has a lot of visitors each year, about 11 million, so that's about the same number as visiting the Louvre Museum in Paris. Despite its popularity, a lot of accidents happen on this lake, and nobody knows for sure why. One of the explanations may lie beneath the surface of this mysterious lake. There's a lot of debris and rubble in there, along with random objects that have been tossed in, like boats, lawn chairs, and even fishing wire. All this creates a tricky underwater obstacle course. With the added low visibility on the surface of the lake, this place can become risky to navigate. Another one of those lakes that looks like someone might have overdone with editing is the Grand Prismatic Spring, located in Yellowstone National Park, which stretches into the states of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Swimming here is completely prohibited. Why? It's 189 degrees Fahrenheit in the center, almost close to boiling temperatures, and the outermost ring reaches around 131, hence the colors. Since the center of the water is way too hot for any life to make it, there's nothing clouding the surface. The lack of any living organisms here creates that vivid blue that looks almost painted over. On the small Mediterranean island of Cyprus, there's not a lot of rain during the summer. That's why some bodies of water here become so dry that in certain areas they get covered in a layer of baked salt. It's the case for the Larnaca Salt Lake. Now don't be fooled by the eerie landscape. These lands can easily become a trap. That's because it's easy to get confused about what's actually a dry surface and what's just a thin layer of salt on top of water or mud. More so, underneath the crust are salt crystals, which can cause problems for people's skin. Samisen Hole is one of the most dangerous places to swim in the whole of Thailand. It's because it's very deep, reaching 280 feet, and gets extremely dark. At certain points, as divers get lower, they can even reach places with zero visibility. No wonder a lot of people get confused and can't seem to find their way up anymore. The largest lake in Africa and the third largest lake in the entire world is called Lake Victoria. Not all of its waters are unsafe for people, but some regions can rapidly cause problems. Why? Particularly because it has its own isolated weather system, and that makes the weather really unreliable. It can go from bright and sunny to terrible in a matter of seconds. I mean, who would want to get caught swimming in the middle of a storm, right? Pustoye Lake is located in Siberia, so I'm guessing I don't need to tell you the waters here get extremely cold. But if you look at the lake, there's nothing out of the ordinary with these waters. Is that completely true? Most likely not, and people tend to avoid swimming here at all costs, even if they can resist the freezing cold waters. So, what makes Lake Pustoye so mysterious and dangerous? Well, nothing seems to want to live here, and scientists have yet to discover why. They tried to fill the lake with many types of fish and various plant species to see if they could survive in the waters, but the results were disappointing. Since we don't know exactly what makes it so difficult to survive here, don't go running for your swimming trunks just yet. It's best if you stay away. Hey, you don't have to tell me twice.